Hello, heretics, heathens, and other blasphemers. This is Veritas Voices. I am Lilith. I'm here with Renee of Renevelation, and we are here back from the lovely hiatus you so kindly granted us to talk about more crazy Christian tweets because it's just too much fun
Yeah,
and also a little bit terrifying, but fun.
yeah. It's a little bit of shock, terror, fun, but also sadness, and it's a mixed bag of emotions, so to speak.
Yeah, well, we laugh lest we cry.
Yeah.
And this week I'm very, very excited because Jen sent us a viewer suggestion. Um, she requested that we discuss She Who Must Not Be Named.
Yeah. Normally we would normally we wouldn't feature this person because of obvious reasons.
Well,
But
she's crazy.
but it was a recommendation from one of our friends, from Jen at I Wear Crocs a lot. I Wear Crocs a lot on Twitter, and she's a friend of ours, and it's sort of our first suggestion. So
Well, and
we
Jen
quit.
is
So
Jen is smart too, so she
yeah,
always I trust her to pick good things.
yeah.
And in fairness, this particular individual is a wonderful cesspool of insanity.
Yeah. Well, without further ado, this comes from, you might have heard from her, Esther Thomason at Lead 1225. She had the following to say: I believe our minds can communicate with the Holy Spirit even after our earthly bodies die. Thoughts? Then she replied to somebody: when I prayed to God to give me insights when I was dating my husband, I heard my son's voice in encouragement. He said, we are coming down. So essentially, she heard from her children prior to her children being born, which is
Right.
normal.
Totally normal. I mean, this is the type of thing where I'm not sure if it's a psychotic break, if she's like rewriting the memory, which does happen. Our memories are disturbingly fluid, or if she's just straight up lying. And knowing SJ, she's probably just lying. But that's one of my problems with Christianity is that it elevates things that would otherwise be called psychotic breaks to the level of prophecy. And this is this wonderful thing. And I'm like, no, no, hearing disembodied voices is not a good sign.
Yeah.
No. It's
And
it's kind of sorry, go ahead.
this is really something that I observe pretty much with Christians in general. Like, they sort of base their Christianity on these experiences that they have, like hearing voices or feeling the Holy Spirit inside your tummy or inside your heart or wherever, and that means that it's totally true.
Somewhere in
Even
the
though it,
general torso region.
yeah, even though it may just be a psychological phenomenon, it may just be you just for whatever reason being overcome with joy or feeling something, I don't know, but you having a feeling doesn't mean that your feelings are in any way a validation for Christianity. Like, your feelings are just that, they are feelings, and they aren't parsimoniously or more parsimoniously explained by God than they are by you simply had a feeling and you're attributing it wrongly to a thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're quite right. The problem is, and that's why I say to people, I don't necessarily doubt your experience. I doubt your interpretation of it. I don't I want you to justify not that you had the experience, but that it means what you think it means. And part of the reason that I think Christianity, and especially like the evangelical church version of Christianity, tends to promote poor mental health so dramatically is that it idolizes things like this. So someone might have, a minor, not like a psychotic break, but a minor kind of a glitch in their brain. Not anything earth-shattering, not the end of the world. But instead of being like, "Oh, hey, get that checked out," like the same way you would with a fever or, some other small physical ailment, it gets idolized. And then
Yeah,
they want to have those experiences and have them more and exaggerate them in their mind. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, this is the good thing. This means you're special. This means God loves you. This means you aren't going to hell and are possibly quite important. You
Yeah.
know, that's not a healthy way to deal with aberrations in your brain and like things that might otherwise have been very minor and not like just totally, the same level as having a bump or a bruise in terms of
Yes.
psychological health.
And and I think that is also where pretty much then the church group comes in. Like they say something like, "I experienced something strange, like I sort of had a dream maybe where the devil appeared in front of me," and then they say, "Well, that's not a good sign. You need to repent." And then they believe that repentance grants this great feeling, and then they, because they expect it, get this great feeling, and then they share it, and then they'll say, "Well, I had that too," and so it cross confirms for them, even though it
Of course.
doesn't confirm at all what they believe. And I think that is also, I don't know what how we can explain this with SJ, but I think at least a coherent, sensible explanation is that she sort of had an experience, she sort of heard a voice, and then sort of when sharing this with other group members or when elaborating on it, it sort of got exaggerated to this whole story where she
Yeah.
heard her son's voice and
Well, and
like
like I said before, our minds can rewrite our memories to exaggerate one point and minimize
yeah,
another until it turns into a big fish story without us knowing it.
to the point
And
where you
yeah,
can tell a lie to where you can tell others a lie and you tell it so often that you actually come to genuine belief in your own lie. That happens.
oh, 100%. 100%. And that's the part that I find really dangerous. People who, maybe do not have serious psychological issues, have any psychological issue, however small, made worse by this kind of thinking. And people who have genuine, serious psychological issues who need treatment for everybody's sake,
Yeah,
instead of actually getting treatment, get told that they should foster mental ill health essentially
yeah,
and keep it going. It's the best thing ever. And so it just makes everything, Christianity makes everything worse.
yeah.
Just
What I
all of the
do,
things.
what I do want to say about that, because I have known SJ in the past and we have talked in the past, so I know a little bit about her experiences. And like the reason she ultimately believes, is not because of Kalam or not because of fine tuning or because of various arguments. It's because of experiences like the one we just talked about, but also sort of an experience with Jesus. But I think on another occasion she also had an experience with the devil, with Satan, and with the demonic.
Oh,
So
goody.
that's one of her reasons. But speaking of the demonic, I think you also have a tweet that has
Yes, I was
something
just
to
going to
say
say,
about that.
speaking of crazy, we have the never ever sane ever Pastor Mark Driscoll. Pastor Mark has, of course, banned me because I pointed out when he was being an idiot one time. I don't even remember why. But Pastor Mark is proposing something that I actually heard as a child that has done so many children psychological damage. He wrote, "Sometimes invisible friends are a child's active imagination, but other times they are visits from the demonic."
Well,
So let's be clear. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, your child's imaginary friends are real and demons.
yeah. And I think that is also really harmful because I didn't have an imaginary friend as a child, but children have a lot of fantasy. Like they play a lot of things inside their head and they catch up on like they have a wild imagination. And to stifle that and to tell the parents, listen, your child having an imagination, your child simply being a child and playing and imagining stuff that is wrong and that needs to be stopped is harmful and stifling for the child.
Absolutely. No, and my parents genuinely, I don't know where they heard it from. They were young, and I'm sure some pastor they trusted told them this, but they were like, no, really, sometimes so they told me this at an age where it was conceivable I could have had imaginary friends. Like, I can't say how much that fucked up my imagination, but also, I don't know. I wonder sometimes if it might have been a touch of a mixed blessing in a way, because the fact that I was so hesitant about my imagination might have made it more difficult for me to honestly imagine up God experiences. Like, I was always aware if I was imagining, and I kind of didn't feel right doing that. So I don't know, maybe that was, I don't know. I'm just trying to look for a silver lining. It's so fucking creepy.
But one thing which I immediately thought about when I read that tweet, and you probably had a different reaction to it because of your baggage in the past, one of the things I immediately thought was, well, invisible friends can be demons. Well, how ironic. Well, Mark, how do you know that your invisible friend isn't actually a demon?
You know, that is one rational account of Christianity that I've heard, that in fact, the Christian God is basically Satan, the bad guy. And he's just been faking everyone into thinking he's the good guy by insisting that he's the good guy. And Gnostic Christianity held that the God of the Old Testament was the bad guy. And I mean, it's still fucked in the head, but it's far less fucked in the head than Orthodox Christianity.
It's definitely a defensible thesis. Let's
Far
just put
more
it there.
defensible. It's far less ridiculous than no. The genocidal Old Testament God is really the good guy because reasons.
Yeah. I mean, like these people who say, yeah, God was a villain and God is a bad guy, at least they wouldn't have a problem with the problem of evil, because they would simply say, yeah, it's just an evil God. What can you do? We're fucked.
Yeah. Jesus came to help us out from evil God, but evil God is still super evil. Well, there's another Mark Driscoll that you brought up, and so you should read that one.
Yeah, because apparently God is good and he is not at all evil. In fact, God is a victim. Let's think about that for a minute and let's read what he has to say.
Poor omnipotent being. Sorry, go ahead.
God is the biggest victim in all of history. Everyone has sinned against God, and God has sinned against no one. Rather than making us pay, God sent the Son, Jesus Christ, to pay our debt to God. Well, boy, do I feel sorry for an omnipotent, invincible entity who we have offended by our mere existence and who has never sinned at all.
Yeah, only by
Never
definition, because they'll say that he's the definition of good, in which case good is a terrible thing and I don't want to be involved. But
and of course, God
yeah,
never made us pay.
well, I will say this much at least. The Christian persecution complex is honestly come by. I mean, if you can seriously pretend that the most powerful being in the universe is the victim.
Yeah. Then pretty much anything goes right. I mean, I don't get how an omnipotent, invincible being can be the victim at all. Like, how is that possible, even by definition? How is that even a coherent concept that an all-powerful being can somehow be bullied, so to speak?
Well, I can tell you one element of it that might clarify a little bit.
Yeah.
In Christianity, because God is all powerful, we are told that because he's like the everything, that offenses against him are therefore infinite. Like the offense against God is the worst offense. And this is obviously completely crazy.
Yeah.
But it it's told to you and beat into you, usually metaphorically, at such a young age that you kind of buy it because you're like, maximum is maximum. But when you think about it, it's complete insanity.
Yeah.
Let's say I do the same thing twice, but to two different people in two different circumstances. I steal 2 apples. One I steal from a poor man. That is the only thing he has to eat for supper, and he will go to bed hungry because I took his apple.
Yeah.
The other I pluck from a passing tree on the land of a man who owns 5 orchards. Who have I more wronged?
I would say the poor man who now has nothing to eat.
Exactly. So it's an inverse relationship. As God is greater in our conception, the less he can be considered to have been harmed by literally anything we do.
Yeah. That is also something that I have brought up in the past. Like, if God wanted all of us to believe, then he would make sure that all of us believe. And the fact that he didn't make all of us believe is either evidence that he doesn't exist or that he didn't make any effort. And how much effort would it take for an omnipotent God to make everyone believe? Not at all, pretty much.
Well, I will say this, if we changed one word, the first title would make sense, because I could get behind the statement that God is the biggest victimizer in all of history. And for example, I'll give the next tweet by The Joy of God. Terrifying. Your body is not yours. It's allocated to you by God for a while. Don't misuse it. It's used to cover your souls. Don't be proud or ashamed because of it. It's God's choice, not yours. Keep it well, for it's God's property. Now, those of you who might be hearing sexual undertones in this are completely right. This is 90% about sex. This is coming from a woman, a Catholic woman. And of course, the idea that your body is your own, but it's far more than sex. It's that and everything else. I mean, this is literally explicitly laying out slavery. Your body doesn't belong to you. It's the property of someone else that you're allowed to take care of because you're using it to do what they want, not because you have any right or investment of your own.
And that's pretty much one of the reasons why I always say Christianity doesn't just promote slavery, Christianity is slavery.
That
because of statements like that.
That is 100% true. That is maybe the truest thing you've ever said. You've said lots of true things.
Well, I have said many very true things, but I think it ranks up there. Let's just say that. And
definitely.
Yeah, and I don't know what to even say about that, or how she, I think her name is Rosemary or something like that, how she would go about justifying that statement even. I mean, who says that our bodies are the property of God? Is it God who says that? Well, that's circular. Is it men or women who say that? Well, who is she to say who my body belongs to?
It's this false and twisted relationship that Christianity has with the concept of choice. You have to make things our choice or it's not our fault. But then you're only allowed to make one choice, and somehow that's still a choice.
Yeah.
So
it's also about,
yeah.
It's also, I think, has this great undertone of authority as well.
Oh, yeah.
Like, God is the authority, and you cannot do what you want to do. You are bound by him, and you are like his puppet, or as it also says in the Bible, I think I'm paraphrasing here, who is the clay that the clay can tell what the potter should do. Something
well,
along
if the clay
lines.
gains sentience, then yes, it fucking can. God is just the worst. The worst. I'm sorry, he's the worst. But speaking of which, I think we should look at the desiring God tweet, because John Piper also has a very disturbing relationship with God and desire.
Yeah. So this is from Desiring God. It's an account run, I think, from a ministry by John Piper. I think Desiring God is sort of his ministry or his platform. This is a quote from John Piper shared by this account. If you says this, if you share the desires of the world, you will pass away. You will not only lose your treasure, you will lose your life. If you love the world, it will pass away and take you with it.
Now remember, the world means everything. So anything you enjoy in the world, and everyone that you don't love only in relationship to God. So anything that you care about in the world, no matter how small, even if it's like, hey, I really like this band. No, that's caring about something that isn't God, and we can't have that. Yeah, it's, do I really have to explain why this is incredibly fucked up?
Yeah, go for it.
I don't even know. It, like, just reading it, just looking at it, if you share the desires of the world, you will die. If you like what people tell you to like, and this feeds in somewhat to their whole view of the world and worldly people, that they just care about things and possessions and being rich because that's the only thing they care about, blah, 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 blah. It, and they wonder why we don't call this good news. No, the idea that I will be killed and tortured for even enjoying anything that someone else does not approve of is not good news.
One thing which I want to say about that, it's sort of a statement which I've read on Twitter, I think some time ago. The way that Christians sort of derive objective meaning from life, like the objective meaning being worshipping and serving God in order to get an afterlife, is pretty much robbing life from everything that is objectively meaningful to us.
True. Yeah, it's again that refusal, not an inability, a refusal to understand inverse relationships.
Yeah.
The idea that our life is only valuable if it's eternal, as opposed to being valuable because it's not, and because we have to make decisions that actually matter. Yeah. That's just, it's Christianity flips everything into its opposite. And it refuses to let you understand reality in any sense. You have to deny reality. That's the rule.
And as far as this tweet goes from Desiring God or from John Piper by extension, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, if it means to be a Christian to not enjoy life, to pretty much also hate life, or to at best tolerate it, I don't know.
Anyone who does not hate father, mother, son, or daughter, husbands, lands for my sake is not my disciple.
I don't know why they think this to be good news, and this would be a terrible gospel, or it wouldn't be good news at all. As you said, it would be it's a terrible way to promote your religion. It doesn't appeal to me at all. But speaking of terrible ways to promote your religion, I think you also have another tweet concerning that.
Well, this attitude gives some understanding, hopefully, to why you would come up with such evil, tone-deaf insanity as Ray Comfort did when speaking to Richard Dawkins recently about the loss of his mother. And he starts off good with, Richard Dawkins, sincere condolences, Professor, on the loss of your mother. I lost both parents. Then he becomes an asshole. Well, again, he reverts to his natural assholey state. I hope her passing makes you think about yours and about the wonderful claims of the gospel. Perhaps you could watch The Fool, Ray Comfort, devastated when Richard Dawkins says this. on YouTube.
Yeah. That, as far as I'm concerned, is just completely...
If an atheist ever punches Ray Comfort right through his smug face, this is evidence of why they were totally fucking justified. I don't even, this is a total hypothetical, but they will be justified.
I mean,
Who
one thing,
says this?
I mean, two things which I want to say about that, because as I've said on Twitter and as I'm going to say now, it's a blatant, it's blatantly disrespectful to Richard Dawkins' mother, because Ray Comfort uses her as a weapon, and or as I called it on Twitter, as apologetic ammunition against Richard Dawkins, and it is disrespectful to Richard Dawkins because it shows that Ray Comfort does value him as a person. He values him or sees him as a being that needs to come to Christ, and that can go really long, and that can use their emotions against in order to bring him to his wicked doctrine, pretty much.
It's an incredibly wicked doctrine, yeah.
And this is also not the first time that he has used the death of another person in order to drive home his point. I mean, I have actually watched this movie, The Fool, and and there's a guy within the movie who, as he told us later, died. His name was Jürgen. And,
yeah.
And he, again, used the death of another person in order to drive home his doctrine, in order to spread his good news, or his supposed good news.
Good news.
I think it's really telling the way that, or what Ray Comfort said here, because I don't think he sees people or dead people. He doesn't see them as people. He sees them as something to be used as emotional.
He sees them as marks. He sees them as a con man sees a mark and says, how do I get that guy? There's a couple of things that are disgusting here and a couple of things that are stupid. The use of his mother is disgusting. The use of the threat of death is both disgusting and stupid. But it's exceptionally stupid that he seems to think that Richard Dawkins has not thought about his own death.
Yeah.
Like as if, and this is part of the Christian mythology that they keep going on, the idea that we haven't thought about our death or are avoiding thinking about it. I mean, granted, I don't spend all my time thinking about it because that's a waste. But the idea that we're somehow afraid of death the way that they are afraid of death. And we're not. I mean, the idea that Richard Dawkins hasn't thought about this, I remind you, he wrote this. I'm going to read a quote from him, from one of his books that he actually wants to be read at his funeral, and I think I'm going to have it at mine too. We are going to die, and that makes us the lucky ones. Most people are never going to die because they are never going to be born. The potential people who could have been here in my place, but who will in fact never see the light of day, outnumber the sand grains of the Sahara. Certainly those unborn ghosts include greater poets than Keats, scientists greater than Newton. We know this because the set of possible people allowed by our DNA is so massively outnumbers the set of actual people. But in the teeth of these stupefying odds, it is you and I, in our ordinariness, that are here.
It's a beautiful quote, most definitely. I mean, it's completely absurd that Ray Comfort thinks that Richard Dawkins hasn't contemplated his own death. But I think that is also, as you said, sort of what Christians see us as, like these people are in denial and who run away from God. And if they only were to have a loss in their family, and if they have a traumatizing experience, then they're confronted with death, and then they will definitely come to Jesus, and then they
Then
will be
we
saved.
can sneak in and strike. But I invite people to think about which exactly is the grander view of life? Which the more honest, which the more brave? Which of these two men actually has good news? Because it fucking isn't Ray Comfort.
Yeah. And let's say even if Ray Comfort was the one who had the good news, it doesn't matter to me at all. What matters to me is whether it's true. Is it true and is it reasonable? And the fact of the matter is, it is neither true nor reasonable what Ray Comfort believes, espouses, and what he wants to get us to buy into.
Admittedly, I was thinking of news in terms of something which is actually true, but I should perhaps qualify that in the modern day.
Yeah.
But again, yeah, there's that very unhealthy non-relationship with truth, which was one of the reasons I really wanted us to include this Chesterton quote that you found. Would you read that for us?
Yes, I will. I think we have featured him 2 times already on our show. It's again this G.K. Chesterton fan account. G.K. Chesterton was a Catholic who died, I don't know, in the 18th, 19th century, I don't know. He said this: the teacher is allowed to say that twice 2 is 4, not because it is less dogmatic, but because it is less disputed. In other words, education is easy when dogma is universal. It only becomes difficult when men are divided about dogmas.
He was 20th century, and I want to smack his mustache off his face because this is so stupid. And it's not just stupid, it's painfully dishonest, and it denotes the kind of false equivalency that is always coming from the religious. You're just dogmatic about 2 plus 2 equals 4. No, it's a demonstrable reality. What was it that they said in 1984? Freedom is the freedom to say that 2 plus 3 equals 5. If that is granted, all else follows. In other words, freedom is the freedom to be honest about reality, about demonstrable reality, about the evidence of your own senses. And 2 plus 2 is 4 is not a dogma. It's something that you can and should demonstrate as many times as you want. Count on your fingers. You will never ever find that 2 plus 2 does not equal 4.
Yeah, it's pretty much true by 2 plus 2 equaling 4 is pretty much true by definition. Like 4 is defined in such a way that it is 2 equals 2 or 2 plus 2. It's not dogmatic. It's part of the definition. It's not something that we are taught, that we cannot ever question. It's not something that is hammered home into our heads by a preacher, and he never presents evidence for it. We know that 2 plus 2 equals 4.
Because we can demonstrate it. Because we can demonstrate it as many times as you want. Because you can test it at any point ever. Because it's an axiom. It's axiomatically true depending on the definitions of numbers and set theory. There's no way for 2 plus 2 not to equal 4. You could call the numbers something different, but the fact of what the set numbers in set theory represent and how they interact is not something you get to just fake out. It's not a matter of preference, dogma. This is the kind of thing that Christians have to do, to tell such astounding lies so frequently, such ridiculous absurdities, I think is probably the best evidence in the world. Their own testimony of dishonesty is the best evidence in the world that they are lying. They're not just wrong, they're lying. It's absurd, and I'm not going to pretend it's something other than what it is.
Yeah. And I do see this on Twitter a lot when I interact with feels like I've never ever heard an accurate representation of naturalism or of evolution of the Big Bang, and when I say things which I think are not controversial, namely that William Lane Craig is lying or Frank Turek is lying, because I can back it up with video evidence or with comfort, I can back up my claims. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I know. And
they're
people will tell
projecting.
me that William Lane Craig is intelligent. Maybe he is, maybe he's just a liar, but he's saying demonstrably false things and making absurd claims about the contents of other people's minds. There's no way he's right. It's not possible for
One
you to
thing,
tell me what's going on inside my head, especially not when I point out that you're wrong, because I'm in my head. You don't get to tell
yeah,
me that I'm wrong
one
about that. That's gaslighting.
one thing which I do want to say about William Lane Craig, just quickly, is I do think that he's an intelligent person, but his problem is that he's a Christian first, or an apologist first, and then a philosopher. He doesn't. He argues from his conclusion back.
Oh, he
If the
does.
conclusion isn't God did it, then it isn't. Then it simply isn't the argument that William Lane Craig is going to make.
Yeah, that's true enough. Okay. Well, there's
But
one last, yeah.
speaking about people who are apologists first, and then a philosopher second, in this
Or
case,
third or 17th. Yeah,
yeah,
Christian Defenders is a rather sad. Many of us have been blocked by Christian Defenders because they were unable to defend against our questions or pointing out of facts that they found to be inconvenient, such as the absurdity of the following. There is more evidence for Jesus Christ as a historical figure than there is for Julius Caesar. People wouldn't dare to say Julius Caesar was a fictional character from a fairy tale, yet some will say that about Jesus. Hashtag Christian apologetics defend the faith. This
this
is the
was me
type of
personally.
thing, like, who the hell came up with the idea that Jesus is more reasonable? It's there's more evidence for Jesus than for Julius Caesar. Who
Well,
came up with this? Because it's beyond idiotic. I don't know
yeah.
who said this first, and I don't know what kind of drugs they were on.
Well,
But
I think this stems sort of from the idea that because you sort of have more manuscripts for a certain figure, then that automatically means that you have more evidence. But it's not just about the quantity of the evidence, it's also about the quality of the evidence.
well, and
And
let me say, I was pretty disappointed as a Christian when I found out that those thousands of manuscripts only were
90% are from the after uh,
way more than 99% are fourth
after
century or
1000.
later.
Yeah,
But yeah, a huge number of them are they're counting things all the way up to the 16th century. Like,
yeah.
don't get me wrong, that's old, but that's not evidence for the accuracy of the gospel old.
No.
That's not, that's no, Jesus Christ, no, there were cathedrals built by that time. Um, so yeah, I was pretty disappointed. And the mere fact that something is repeated a lot doesn't mean it's true. The Iliad, there are many copies of the Iliad. Does anyone want to propose that that proves that Odysseus really actually pissed off Poseidon and
Yeah.
that, Zeus exists and all the rest of it?
Well, I would also say there are a great many copies of the God Delusion, so there must be something to it, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
But one thing which I also want to say about his point with Julius Caesar's, even though I don't think it's true at all, but let's say it's true that there's more evidence for Jesus than for Julius Caesar. Nobody believes about Julius Caesar that he was God.
Oh yeah, no, there's writings that are all like, oh, he's so supernatural, and add a whole bunch of bullshit around about that. Nobody takes
Nobody
that
believes
shit
that.
seriously.
Yeah.
And I mean, the idea that it's even close to equivalent is ridiculous.
Yeah.
We have his face minted on coins from when he ruled. There aren't
Yeah.
just passing mentions. He's entirely woven into the fabric of history.
Yeah.
There's no
That,
other way to put together history than to include Julius Caesar.
yeah.
And another thing we actually know is the day he fucking died. The
Yes.
Ides of March. You know what we
And
don't know about Jesus because of conflicting accounts? The day he died.
yeah, we don't just know the year, we know actually the day. And that's also what I said earlier about the quality of evidence. Jesus may have a little bit more quantity, okay, but the quality of evidence for Julius Caesar is far more greater. What you said with the coins and what you said with the evidence for the day when he died, that's overwhelming. And with Jesus, let's say he has more evidence, but that would then be evidence for a historical Jesus, not a Jesus, the Son of God, who walked on water, who healed the blind, who resurrected people, who died on the cross, and who came back from the dead, and then who ascended to heaven.
Well, and the truth of the matter is, if Christians had not been such liars from the very beginning, I might have been more inclined to take their accounts as evidence. I'm writing an article briefly for Secular World where I'm going to underline how the actual historical characters in the Gospels are what made me more likely to be a mythicist, because it just doesn't make sense. It's complete insanity. And the way that they lied about everything to try and twist the narrative to what they wanted, why would I believe people who lie so much?
Yeah.
Why?
There's really no good reason at all. I mean, I personally wouldn't go out on a limb to say that Jesus didn't exist, but I would definitely make, for instance, a strong claim that there probably wasn't a Joseph of Arimathea, or there was an empty tomb, there wasn't those kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's essentially where I would draw the line and say, yeah, that definitely didn't happen. And of course, all the miracle bullshit.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. But I'm going to have to lay that out, because if there's been so much dishonesty in the church, and I mean from the first writings to today, everything right through from go to now. And at some point, there was the proverb that George Bush so dramatically bungled, that originally says, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." How many times do you catch a group lying before you stop believing them?
Twice.
Well, even then, you might give them less credibility, but some credibility. But after about 1,000 lies, I just assume everything you're saying is 100% false, because I'm far more likely to be correct.
Yeah.
But we are, as you and I agreed, we're going to talk about the evidence for the historical death and resurrection and empty tomb and all that jazz, because that's going to be fun.
Yeah. I'm also very much looking forward to that. And yeah, that's also going to be fun. And then we will see just how much evidence there is for Jesus. And spoiler alert, it's not going to be as much as there's for Julius Caesar.
Yeah, I am shocked, sir. Shocked. Yeah, it'll be fun. It's always fun to go over these things with you and compare notes. But
Hey, the
I
feeling
think,
is mutual.
aw, you're so sweet.
Yeah.
But I think we've covered enough for today. That's got to be the largest number of tweets we managed to get through in a single episode. So, yeah. All right. Well, I hope you guys all had fun. Thanks again to Jen, aka at I Wear Crocs a Lot, for her suggestion. And if anyone else wants to share the weird and wacky things they find on Christian Twitter, we would be delighted to see them.
Yeah, and not just Christian Twitter, Muslims are also welcome. Like, whatever wacko stuff you find out there, just give it to us and we'll
Oh
see
yeah,
what to do with
share
it.
the crazy, all the crazy.
Yeah.
We love you all, and reason bless.